truth, Alastair Finch had always believed, possessed a physical texture. It lived in the brittle crackle of 14th-century vellum turning under his gloved fingers. It resided in the ferrous, earthy scent of iron gall ink, a scent that clung to his office in the upper archives of the auction house like a sacred incense. His world was one of quiet, empirical certainties, a fortress built of carbon dating, pigment analysis, and paleographic comparison. This fortress stood on the 42nd floor of a steel and glass tower in Manhattan, a hushed sanctuary from the city's frantic pulse below. Down there, truth was a commodity. Up here, it was a science. His home, a Soho loft he shared with his wife, Serena Vance, was a different kind of fortress. It was a testament to her truth, one of polished concrete floors, cavernous white walls, and the sharp, clean scent of expensive lilies that seemed to breed in the minimalist vases. Serena was a star in the firmament of the New York art world. Her gallery, Vance Modern, was a kingmaker. She didn't just sell art, she anointed it. Her truth was one of perception, of market value, of the story that could be sold alongside the canvas. Alastair, with his rumpled tweed jackets and the faint, scholarly stoop of his shoulders, was the quiet engine that powered her narrative. He was her authenticator, her secret weapon, the man whose quiet, academic nod of approval could add a zero to any price tag. "It's the find of the century, Ollie," she'd said, her voice a low, excited thrum. She stood in the center of their living room, backlit by the city lights, a high priestess before her altar. On a velvet-draped stand between them lay the Abigail Alden Journal. A supposed lost manuscript. From a key figure of the early Plymouth colony, filled with rumored revelations about her life and times. It was a piece of pure, unadulterated Americana. A national treasure unearthed. The provenance is impeccable, Serena continued, her eyes glittering with the thrill of the chase, a direct line from a private collection in Devon. Alastair looked at his son, Elias, who was sketching in a corner. Headphones clamped over his ears. At 16, Elias possessed a raw, tempestuous talent that seemed to have sprung from nowhere. It certainly hadn't come from Alastair's own methodical, precise lineage. "Dad, can you even read that?" Elias asked later, peering at the spidery, brown script of the journal Alastair had brought home to study. "It's a conversation across 400 years, Eli," Alastair had replied. His heart swelling with a familiar, academic reverence. "You just have to learn the language." The task was now officially his. The Alden Journal would be the centerpiece of the auction house's spring, Americana, sale. Serena was co-curating the event. The pressure was immense, a silent weight in the climate-controlled air of his lab. His life was a study in contrasts he had long accepted. The quiet, historical truth of his work, and the loud, contemporary truth of his wife's ambition. He believed, foolishly, that they were two sides of the same, valuable coin. He never imagined one was simply a forgery of the other. The lab was Alastair's sanctum, a place where history submitted to the cold, impartial judgment of science. Here, the Abigail Alden Journal lay under the unblinking eye of his digital microscope. He worked late into the night. Long after the city's hum had softened to a distant drone. The manuscript felt right. The vellum had the correct animal scent, the iron gall ink had oxidized in a pattern consistent with 17th-century chemistry. His instincts, honed over 20 years, told him it was genuine. But instinct was for the gallery floor. In the lab, there was only data. He moved to the Raman spectroscope, a device that fired a laser at a microscopic point to identify a material's chemical composition without damaging it. It was the ultimate truth-teller. He focused the laser on a fleck of blue pigment in an illumination on the first folio. A flourish of color, meant to depict the Atlantic sky. He leaned back, waiting for the spectral graph to appear on his monitor. The machine hummed its quiet, analytical tune. Then the graph resolved. A series of sharp peaks appeared. Alastair leaned forward, his blood turning to ice water in his veins. He knew that spectral signature. He ran the sample against The lab's digital database. The result flashed on screen in sterile, damning text. Pigment ID, phthalocyanine blue PB15. Date of first synthesis, 1935. He felt the air leave his lungs, a slow, silent collapse. The room, his sanctuary, suddenly felt like a tomb. He ran the test again on a different folio. And again. The result was the same. A ghost from the future, hiding in plain sight for 400 years. The manuscript was a fake. A brilliant, masterful, almost perfect forgery. But a forgery nonetheless. His first thought was of Serena. Her excitement. Her impeccable provenance. Was she a victim, conned by a masterful forger? Or was she something else entirely? The trust he had held for her, a heavy, solid thing, began to crack. He sat in the sterile silence for an hour, the damning graph burning on the screen. His career was built on one principle. The truth, no matter how inconvenient. But this truth was a bomb that would not only decimate his wife's reputation and a 9-figure auction, but would also detonate the very foundations of his own life. In the cold light of the lab, a new, chilling resolve began to form. He could not fight this lie with the simple, honest truth. He would have to meet it on its own terms. He powered down the spectroscope, erased the night's test logs, and went to his computer. He began to type the preliminary authentication report. Initial analysis of the Abigail Alden journal, he wrote, his fingers feeling like foreign objects on the keyboard, indicates that the materials and script are consistent with the stated period of origin. Further non-invasive testing is recommended. He had bought himself time. He had told his first lie. The investigation began that night. He became a ghost in his own life, maintaining a facade of academic diligence while secretly conducting a forensic audit of his own marriage. He started with the provenance Serena had provided. A private collection in Devon. He used the auction house's deep archives, cross-referencing names and dates. The collection didn't exist. The family name she'd given was an anagram for a vain folly. A sick, private joke. He felt a cold fury rise. But he pushed it down, converting it into fuel. He needed more than a fake history. He needed the forger. He dug into Serena's gallery acquisitions over the past 10 years, looking for a pattern. He found it in a series of rediscovered minor works from the Hudson River School, all sourced from a reclusive art scout named Lorcan Malloy. There were no pictures of Malloy, just a post office box in a forgotten neighborhood in Brooklyn. Alastair's research revealed Malloy was once a brilliant art student, an artist himself, who had dropped out of sight after a bitter dispute over the authenticity of his own graduate work. The final piece fell into place in the most devastating way possible. He was watching Elias paint one evening, marveling at his son's effortless ability to capture the complex play of light on a city street. Elias's style was raw, modern, nothing like the classical masters Alastair revered. But Alastair noticed something else. The way Elias custom mixed his own paint binders, a quirky habit he'd had for years, using a strange combination of linseed oil and a specific synthetic polymer to get a texture he liked. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, washed over Alastair. That night, after Elias was asleep, he took a tiny sample from one of his son's used palettes. He crept back to the lab, his heart hammering against his ribs. He placed the sample from his son's palette under the spectroscope. Then he pulled up the spectral data from the Alden journal he had secretly saved. He displayed them side by side on the monitor. The graphs were identical. Not just similar. Identical. The same unique, custom-mixed chemical signature. The same artistic DNA. The betrayal was now absolute. It wasn't just a business arrangement. This lie, this forgery, was in his home. It was in his son's blood. The man he had raised, the boy whose future he cherished, was the biological son of the forger who had helped his wife build an empire of lies. Alastair looked at the two graphs, the two identical fingerprints of his ruin. He didn't feel grief anymore. He felt a clarity so pure and cold it was almost incandescent. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't just going to expose a forgery. He was going to dismantle a world. Alastair's pain calcified into purpose. For the next week, he moved through his life like a method actor playing the part of a devoted husband and proud academic. He discussed the upcoming auction in New York with Serena, offering notes on the historical context of the other pieces in the sale. He helped Elias with his history homework. He smiled, he listened, he nodded. But behind his placid, academic eyes, a strategist was at work. Each night, in the sterile silence of his lab, he assembled his case. He prepared a presentation, not of words, but of irrefutable, visual proof. The spectral graphs of the phthalocyanine blue. The dead ends of the forged provenance. The scanned images of Lorcan Malloy's obscure, early work, showing a distinctive cross-hatching technique that was mirrored perfectly in the Alden Journal's illuminations. And the final, devastating slide, the side-by-side spectral analysis of the binder from the 400-year-old manuscript and the paint from his 16-year-old son's palette. He confided in only one person, David Chen, the auction house's stoic head of security, a former NYPD detective who trusted data more than people. "I need you to give me control of the main presentation screen during the Alden lot," Alastair had said, showing him a summary of the evidence. "And I need your men by the exit." Chen looked at the data, his face impassive. "I'll handle it," was all he said. The night of the auction arrived, a crescendo of New York society and money. The main hall of the auction house was a glittering sea of couture and champagne. Serena was radiant, a queen in her court, moving through the crowd with an easy, confident grace. Alastair stood beside her, a quiet, scholarly accessory to her triumph. "Nervous?" she whispered to him, squeezing his arm. Her touch felt like a jolt of electricity. "History is being made," he replied, his voice even. "It's always a momentous occasion." She smiled, missing the glacial ice in his eyes. The auction began. Lots came and went. A Tiffany lamp. A first edition Whitman. Then, the room quieted. The auctioneer, a man with a voice like polished mahogany, introduced the final lot of the evening. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, a true piece of our nation's soul. The Abigail Alden Journal." The manuscript was brought to the stage, encased in a climate-controlled vitrine, lit like a holy relic. The main screens behind the auctioneer showed a beautiful, high-resolution video of its pages turning. The bidding started at $10 million. It climbed swiftly. 15 million. 20. Serena stood beside Alastair, her breath held, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. $25 million, the auctioneer called. "Do I hear 26? Alastair gave a subtle nod to David Chen, who stood near the back of the room. 26 million, a bidder called out. At that moment, the screens behind the auctioneer flickered and went black. A collective gasp went through the room. Then, they lit up again, not with the image of the manuscript, but with a stark white slide. At the top, in bold, black letters, "A Study in Deception, the Forensic Autopsy of a Forgery." Alastair stepped away from Serena and walked calmly towards the stage, a small microphone in his hand. A hush fell over the room, thick with confusion and shock. "Good evening," Alastair said, his voice calm, amplified through the hall. "My name is Dr. Alastair Finch. For the past month, I have been conducting a forensic analysis of this item." Serena's face was a mask of disbelief. "Alastair, what is this?" she hissed, but her voice was lost in the silence. "While this manuscript is a masterpiece of artistry," Alastair continued, clicking a small remote, "it is not a masterpiece of history." The first slide appeared, the spectral graph of phthalocyanine blue. This pigment, Alastair explained, his tone that of a lecturer, was not invented until 1935. Another click. The forged provenance records appeared, the anagram, "A Vain Folly," circled in red. A wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. The entire history of the object is a fabrication. Serena's face had drained of all color. She looked trapped, exposed under the hot stage lights. And the forger himself, Alastair went on, his voice dropping slightly, is a ghost. A man named Lorcan Malloy. He clicked again. Malloy's student artwork appeared next to a detail from the Alden Journal. The brushstrokes were identical. But the most definitive proof, Alastair said, pausing for a beat, the forger's true signature, is not in the ink, but in the medium that binds it. He saved the final slide for last. The two spectral graphs, side by side. On the left, Alden Journal binder. On the right, Elias Vance Finch paint palette. Below them, the single, damning word, match. He didn't need to explain it further. He let the slide hang there in the suffocating silence. He looked directly at Serena, whose face had crumpled into a rictus of horror and utter ruin. In that moment, everyone in the room understood. The forgery on the stage was nothing compared to the one that had been standing beside him all along. He turned and walked off the stage as David Chen's men moved quietly toward his wife. The aftermath was a media tsunami. The auction house forgery scandal dominated every news cycle. Serena and Lorcan Malloy were arrested, their faces splashed across the front page of the New York Post. Their empire of beautiful lies, so carefully constructed, was vaporized in a single evening of public, forensic truth. The art world, built on trust and reputation, was thrown into chaos. Galleries scrambled to re-authenticate their collections. Collectors who had bought Serena's discoveries sued. The fallout was total. Alastair returned to the Soho loft with Elias, the cavernous white space now feeling like a mausoleum. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, one evening, amidst boxes being packed for a move to a smaller, quieter apartment uptown, Alastair told his son everything. He laid out the truth with the same dispassionate precision he had used on stage, but his voice was softened with a grief he could no longer contain. He told Elias about Lorcan Malloy, about the paint, about the deep, staggering nature of his mother's deception. Elias, his face pale, listened without interruption. When Alastair finished, the boy stood up and walked to his easel, where a half-finished canvas stood. He stared at it for a long moment, then picked up a palette knife and methodically scraped all the paint from the canvas, leaving it bare and white. He didn't cry. His rage was a quiet, cold thing. Alastair recognized it instantly. Months bled into a year. Alastair resigned from the auction house, unable to stomach the world of commerce any longer. He took a position as a research fellow at the Morgan Library, a place of quiet scholarship, of truth for truth's sake. Serena was convicted, her appeals exhausted. Elias refused to visit her. He had not picked up a paintbrush since the night he scraped his canvas clean. His talent, he felt, was a stolen thing, the product of a tainted bloodline. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alastair took Elias to the Frick collection. They walked through the hushed, opulent rooms, two solitary figures adrift in a sea of beauty. They stopped in front of a Rembrandt self-portrait. The artist's face, etched with age and sorrow, stared back at them. "Do you know how many times this has been challenged?" Alastair said quietly. "Its authenticity has been debated for a century. Some experts say it's real. Some say it's the work of a student." Elias remained silent, his eyes fixed on the painting. "But look at it, Eli," Alastair said, his voice soft. "Forget the provenance. Forget the artist. Just look at the painting itself. The way he captured the light. The honesty in his eyes." He paused, then turned to his son. "Is it true?" he asked. "Or is it beautiful?" Elias looked from the painting to his father. And for the first time in a year, a flicker of something other than anger stirred in his eyes. He didn't answer. But a week later, Alistair came home to the smell of turpentine. Elias was in his room, a new canvas on his easel. He was painting again. His style was different now. Less frantic, more deliberate. He was no longer trying to replicate the world he saw, but to understand it. Alistair stood in the doorway and watched his son work. The truth, he realized, wasn't just a physical texture found in old paper. It was also something you created. Something you rebuilt from the ashes of a beautiful lie. It was a slow, painstaking process. But it was, he now knew, the only art that truly mattered.